Lake Huron and Lake Michigan come together in the Straits of Mackinac, long considered one of the most treacherous waterways on all of the Great Lakes. For nearly 150 years, the Spectacle Reef Lighthouse has guarded ships passing through the straits. It sits 12 miles and a world away from the mainland.
You can see the Straits of Mackinac up there.
Pat McKinstry is the president of the Spectacle Reef Preservation Society, a nonprofit organization he and a group of lighthouse enthusiasts created to restore and preserve the light.
So, Northern Lake Huron buoy has 6-foot seas. Great Duck Island has 4, which means the light right now has 4 to 5. The lighthouse was sold at auction in 2014 to a private individual who's a friend of mine, and he offered me the lighthouse. I wanted to buy the lighthouse for myself, but I believe they should be in public hands because these were built with taxpayers' dollars to save the lives of the public, and the people who lived there should be remembered as public servants. We put a team together of lighthouse historians, restorationists, enthusiasts, and the society raised the cash and purchased the lighthouse.
When we caught up with him, Patrick and a group of volunteers were getting ready to take the 17-mile trek from Sheboygan to the lighthouse, hoping to make up some restoration work before the weather makes such trips too dangerous.
This crew is a very good crew, and all of our volunteers are fantastic. We got 157 volunteers that joined the organization this season. And all their knowledge and skill sets, they all play a role. The one thing that's impressed me is just the amount of passion that people have for this organization that's saving this lighthouse.
But working on a lighthouse that's this far off the shore isn't easy. The first challenge, just getting there.
My greatest fear is the same thing that the keepers experience. It's the weather out here. There are days where you think it's great and then a storm kicks up.
And though the weather on this day looked pleasant enough, the threat of a sudden storm, with high winds and heavy seas, forced the crew to return to the marina. The lighthouse would have to wait.
Well, you don't retain it all.
Fortunately, by the next day, conditions had improved.
If you look down the water, you'll see the reef plain as day.
Spectacle Reef Lighthouse gets its name from the shallow reef it was built on. There are 2 shoals with a ridge between them that resemble a pair of eyeglasses. The design of the lighthouse makes it even stronger in severe weather.
The lighthouse is built out of giant limestone blocks that are 2 foot tall, and their width and their radius differs based on where they're in the light tower. But the way it's built, they have these edges that are cut, almost like puzzle pieces, so that when the waves hit the tower, it actually smushes it all together, making the joints stronger over time.
Spectacle Reef was considered a technical marvel when it was built in 1869, and it became a model for lighthouses built throughout the northern Great Lakes.
The technology in the base camp that was built for Spectacle on Government Island built every other offshore lighthouse up here in the Straits of Mackinac, particularly the Lake Huron side. But all the technology that was developed and engineered for Spectacle makes her kind of the grandmother of every other offshore lighthouse on the Great Lakes in the end. We are on top of Spectacle Reef Lighthouse, about 97 feet above Lake Huron, on the lower parapet. There's 2 parapets, an upper and a lower. We're on the lower side right now. The entire next level was just the lens, and the level below was the service room, where they kept oil and wicks and material, had their little office to take care of their logs each night, when the light was lit, when the foghorn went off, that type of thing. So when you're out here at night, you'll see, if you include this, I believe it's 10 or 11 lighthouses flashing out here at night, and gives you kind of a real idea why these were so important, being out here in the middle of the lake, and how the flash patterns are all different, so people knew what they were looking at. Nowadays, it's hard to tell because you got all these radio towers and whatnot, but when they were built, of course, it was pitch black out here. And the only source of light you had was the lighthouses.
The goal of the Spectacle Reef Preservation Society is to create a learning light where people can come and experience the life of a lighthouse keeper and learn about the history of lighthouses on the Great Lakes.
This thing is kind of cool. It says for spec, ortho tooth iodine. You pull the label back on here, so some kind of toothache medication. So in '64, a guy had a baby on shore, and the wife sent him the footprints of their child. And so these footprints are still here. The engineering and the history there is important, but really it's the stories of the people that were tough enough to survive working at a lighthouse 18 miles away from port, 12 miles in the middle of the lake, with no human contact for months on end, and some of whom gave up their lives to protect sailors out there. Those stories need to be preserved and told over and over again, and the lighthouse is the perfect conduit for that, since that is where they were based and that was their home for years on end.
The first step of renovation was making the station safe for the people working on it. That meant filling holes in the floor and remediating lead paint. Next came structural repairs, waterproofing, and other basic fixes. It all paves the way for the restoration and cosmetic work that will happen in the future.
This one's cracked behind me. There's another one up top here that's cracked. I was going to replace those today too. And we'll take all the plexiglass out that's yellow, but these five over here, five, they were all shattered with holes in them. And we replaced all those last week with brand new glass. You'll see here. So it's a bulletproof, allegedly a bulletproof laminate. So it should take a pounding from the ice and the wind out here pretty good. But we are in the lantern room of Spectacle Reef. This is our beautiful light that's out here. It's an LED light. It flashes red every 5 seconds. So 1 second on, 4 seconds off.
The light is still maintained by the U.S. Coast Guard and can be seen for 11 miles. But the Fresnel lens that was in place when the lighthouse was automated in 1972 had a far greater reach.
This piece comes to us from our light, Spectacle Reef. This is one piece of it. And our lens had panels inside it that rotated around the 8-foot diameter light that made it flash every 4 seconds.
The lens was a second order Fresnel, and it had a red shroud attached to it on the outside. So it's actually the heaviest Fresnel lens ever used on the Great Lakes. And when it was installed, it could be seen for 29 miles.
Just needs a lot of tender love and care.
Carl Jahn is known as Keeper Carl. He's a lighthouse keeper reenactor and a member of the Spectacle Reef Preservation Society.
Makes you look a little more official. It's a love for lights for whatever reason that draws people like me and Patrick and different ones.
This is my weirdness, right? If you put your ear up against it sometimes, it is almost like she kind of talks to you in a weird way. Maybe.
Come back, she says.
We've got volunteers coming all the way from Texas, Wisconsin. Families come over here to spend time to help us restore this light. Paint, scraping paint, sweeping floors, painting stuff. It's enjoyable. There's nobody comes out there and has to work to 6-8 hours that we can spend on station. You're there to have as much fun as you do help us get the light preserved.
Out here at the lighthouse, it's pretty much whatever you can do to make it work and make everything stick.
Mark Lee lives 20 miles across Lake Huron from the light, and he can see it from his home. He's a masonry specialist who does foundation repair and brickwork, and he's a volunteer.
Just gotta give it one of them. Today I patched a couple holes that were pretty significant holes in the stairwell going up to the tower on the first floor. And then I did a little bit of caulking and getting stuff ready for paint and making sure things are waterproof for the winter.
The crew of volunteers had intended to stay and work until late in the day, but once again, the weather had other plans.
We've got a storm coming in right now. We're trying to beat it back to the shore. And we lock her up in a couple minutes and we're out of here.
Well, we got 20 minutes to leave before we might get caught in the weather. I'm still trying to get ahead of the weather. Otherwise, you guys might get wet on the way home. I don't want to repeat what we did 2 weeks ago where we were out here in 8-foot seas for 3 hours, because that was awful. This far offshore, at the second most remote lighthouse on the Great Lakes and third in the country.
You don't do that.
Mother Nature calls your shots. Let's be ready to pull. Go.
Patrick and his crew of volunteers will be back to continue their efforts to preserve the Spectacle Reef Lighthouse and to build a new generation of guardians of the Great Lakes.
What I want to achieve is build that generation. So when I can no longer walk and be in a wheelchair or whatever, when I can't climb that ladder anymore, I know it's in good hands. And she'll still be there in great shape, teaching people the story of Spectacle Reef, teaching people on shore some history, teaching techniques and methods on how to restore lighthouses. That I can sit back in my retirement home and know she's in good hands.